Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda sedang menonton Sudut Pandang. Malam ini saya ingin bincangkan tentang sebuah negara yang begitu mendominasi pelbagai kedudukan ataupun carta dunia dalam aspek kehidupan. Antara negara teratas atau paling atas sebenarnya dalam senarai kedudukan kualiti hidup, quality of life, indeks tentang paling kurang rasuah, mereka juga di atas, indeks tentang keamanan, mereka juga di atas, indeks productivity dan persaingan teknologi dunia, mereka juga di atas, dan negara yang saya maksudkan tentunya berada di utara Eropah yang bernama Sweden. Oleh itu, kita akan bersama dengan Duta Besar Sweden di Malaysia, Pak Anne Yambom, dan saya akan minta izin untuk bicara dalam bahasa Inggeris. Thank you so much, Mr. Ambassador, for coming here tonight. And I guess the first question I have to ask, because maybe a lot of Malaysians also would like to know, what's the tragedy that happened recently in your country, a bomb exploding maybe for the first time, linked to terrorism. And in your part of the world, that is not something that you are used to. It never happened. But now, even though you are high up in the rankings of a lot of positive things in the world, but now you're starting to see this coming over to Northern Europe, even to your country. Your views on this, and maybe how it affected the things that you're doing now in Sweden.
Well, thank you for inviting me, first of all. Well, it was a huge tragedy, of course, and come as a big surprise for all the Swedes. We consider ourselves offering a very open and transparent society, and we've never had any fear for terrorism whatsoever. All the investigation has not been concluded yet, so we shouldn't be too firm on the consequences and the aspects of terrorism and so on and so forth. But it's clear that this is no country is immune. I mean, whatsoever. This is the worst part of globalization. We are connected to each other, and even though we, as I said, a very open society, transparent, huge amount of immigrants, we offer 1% of our GDP in development cooperation and so on and so forth.
Yes.
Doesn't mean that we are immune to tragic consequences. And we have to prepare for the worst.
We're thankful that it's minimal damage.
The minimal damage, and it could have been worse.
Okay, but moving forward, because this is the new fight of globalization, a lot of countries have to adapt not only security and political measures, but also economical measures and social. And I've read a lot of literature on this, and I've even spoken to a few experts that came recently for the conference on Nordic countries. And we have been eyeing, in fact, on the area of welfare model for our own country. And when we look at the Nordic countries, especially Sweden, you have managed to do this well. Just about maybe 100 years from agrarian right up to high technology and high value added services to the world. That is now your main forte. And at the same time, you have managed to bring up the quality of life without making costs of things higher, without making inflation a problem, and you now have this. So there's this concept now called the enabling social welfare model, for example. It's not enough to do it as has been done decades ago, but now how do you enable the individual to come and be empowered, for example, and this help in the great mobility of globalization right now, because anybody from the Nordic countries, for example, that's gone through the system, they can match any demand from any part of the world in these high-tech industries. And your education system, your economic policies has been geared towards this. It's not just the public or the state, but it's also the corporate sector that highlights the need for individual to be empowered. If you can share the secrets with us on this.
That's a big question, of course. I think it's important to state also that 100 years ago, Sweden was a poor country. There were farmers, actually 75%. Swedish was a very poor country, and we've done development now quite fast the last 50 years. Many studies, international studies, have been done on the Nordic model, on the Swedish model. And I think it's fair to say, as you mentioned, that most of them have come to the conclusion that the model is extremely successful when it comes to deliver a combination of economic efficiency and growth with social inclusion, cohesion, fair income distribution, and a peaceful labor market. And why is that? Well, it's no easy answer, of course. The welfare model as such has been developed gradually, but I think there are some core aspects that are important to mention. Of course, one that comes to my mind is social cohesion. Everybody should be part of the system. Everybody should contribute, and they should also benefit. That's important. And the services, they serve not only the people but the economic system. It's free education, free healthcare, generous unemployment benefits, childcare, elderly care, and so on and so forth.
Formulations that have not had the opportunity to have gone to Sweden. When you say free, it's for everybody, right?
Free for everybody and free of charge. And of course financed by taxes that everybody in Sweden pay, which means that a welfare system is for everybody and everybody contribute. Another area which is important in Sweden is equality of opportunities. Both men and women are part of the labor force. The labor force rate is 75%. How is that possible? Well, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, women stayed in home. They took care of the children and the elderly. Now they do that to some extent, but they don't spend 30 years doing that. 2 years with the kids. It's free benefit for 13 months to stay home with the kid, but it's often shared with the husband. And then they can more directly move into the labor force. And the industry needs not only men but also women. So the industry benefits from that.
That's why I want to take 2 steps back to look at the tax system and structure, because it's interesting how in this part of the world we're asking the government to lessen our income tax, for example. Maybe the ceiling of 28 is too high, we want it to be 26 or even 25%, but it's even as high up as more than 50% in Sweden. But the question is here, if you say that, and I link that to the fact that people say that if it's free, the quality is bad, especially if it comes from the government. No way it can be the corporate or private sector. If you look at health and hospitals in this country, for example. But in Sweden, it's the other way around. Even though the state ensures these key areas like health and education, but the quality has been maintained not only high, but the benchmark of the global scenario, for example. So how do you do that? Efficiency of delivery, and the size is big, but it's still efficient.
Well, it's once again, there's no easy question. It is the government sector is of course operating efficiently, and there's a social contract, meaning that you pay high tax, but people wouldn't pay high tax if they wouldn't get anything in return. They know that what they deliver in terms of tax is not put aside in private pockets, it's put to the benefit of themselves. There's no corruption, hardly. Sweden always end up top when it comes to Transparency International's anti-corruption indexes, 1, 2, even 3. So the money is spent wisely, and the culture within the government and in the state and local authorities is that they have to perform. And there are certain things that have helped us, of course. Sweden is a society basically on trust. You trust each other, privately and in government. And why do you do that? Well, there's the Swedish culture is that way, but also some important laws that we introduced in the 17th century, 1766, the law of public access to documents and freedom of press, meaning that if I'm as a citizen is questioning the government for a decision or for any, I can ask them what are the papers, what are the decisions. That means that the government cannot do things that the people don't like. They have to perform and they have to respond.
I guess that's the point that the audience maybe can see from our discussion here for the first block, is that it's not just the individual or the state, it's the ecosystem and the structures that you have that enables for that to happen. If you want to rein in free market capitalism, because that can be bad for maybe the family if both parents have to fight to get money and they both go work long hours. But you have other social imperative that, you know, put a boundary, there's a limit to how much you can fight for that, but you have also to balance it with others. That is very clear. But even in Sweden, there's a lot of focus now on how technology is shaping and changing things. And now with Internet and Web 2.0, Economy 2.0, Politics 2.0, we've heard the name Julian Assange, for example, and I had Pirate Bay Peterson was here sitting at the exact place you were sitting about 1 year ago. And boundaries are being opened, and the welfare system or model have got also to migrate forward. So let's talk about that after we come back from a very short break.
Setiap Jumaat, secara langsung, You Wartawan.
You wartawan, anda juga wartawan.
Jangan hanya kita melihat dalam kelompok kita. Apa dia kena orang muda di luar?
BN hanya minta mereka membalas budi dengan sedikit gertakan.
Pemimpin itu harus bermula pada hari ini. Di sini mereka membentuk satu karakter politik yang sendiri.
BN perlu cari formula untuk menawan semula hati rakyat.
Hantarkan pandangan ataupun komen anda ke platform yang kami sediakan.
Secara langsung, You Wartawan. Setiap Jumaat, 10 malam di Astro Awan. Berita segenap dimensi.
I'm trying to picture myself on the streets of Stockholm. Gamla stan is one of my favorite places.
Lots of snow
earth.
tonight. And
Yes, 2 times I went there. There was no snow because it was only rain and cold. But maybe I can pay a visit again because I really want to see changes to society. There's nothing like looking and seeing it for yourself on ground. And I can see it when you look at the people in Stockholm or even the outskirts that I went to. But there are no big challenges. And we look at, I don't think it's just a coincidence that Pirate Bay had a Swedish influence on it, because when people are allowed to think, you know, and given the encouragement, they don't need to worry about their income or they don't need to worry about their health care. They can think and be creative and innovative. And I think this is the part where Malaysia want to learn a lot from Sweden. Despite having everything else, we want to look at creativity and innovation. And to look at creativity and innovation nowadays, we cannot separate that from the fast changing world and evolution of ICT, information communication technology. How do you see this in this respect? Because if we look at Pirate Bay, if we look at WikiLeaks, and it's not just technological anymore. It's also, at the same time, changing the shape of politics, changing the shapes of how society view ethics and the right to know, for example. So is this being discussed, and do you see this as a very important thing moving forward?
yes, of course. I mean, Sweden is one of the countries in the forefront of the information society in terms of internet penetration, mobile users. We'll always come up top, and there's a long tradition of Sweden being sort of interested in energy, in new technologies, and in these fields. We adapt quick, and we like it, and we move forward. And that's also linked to innovation, creativity, which you are talking about. The Swedish education system, by the way, it was introduced in 1842, compulsory for everyone, not only the rich class, but also the poorer ones, poor farmers, etc. Has always have a tradition that encouraged people to think, not only follow, this is the theory, but encourage them to press beyond the borders. Is that correct? Do you have any other answer? Find your own conclusions, make your own mistakes, but advance, move to another level. And the information society, new technology, make everything possible. You can get information everywhere. You can be connected in the smallest region, in the worst part of Sweden, which is called, you have everything available for you. So the Swedish society has shown over and over again that it's it can transform itself. Now it's the information society. In the 70s, Sweden was one of the biggest shipbuilding countries in the world.
Yes.
We dismantled that and moved to another one. In the 50s, it was textile industry. So I think the basis of the Swedish success is that the economy can transform itself, and it can do so thanks to the safety nets that are built into the welfare society. A person in a factory where that closed down knows that he's not losing his job,
Yes.
education. He can get re-education to go to another sector. That makes him believe that change is possible, change is good.
Mobility and flexibility. I see what they call it as enabling welfare model in that sense, so that, like you said, even if you're out of a job, you're not worried because you know that you can upgrade
yourself,
skill yourself, so that anybody around the world who's in that particular niche area or industry, you are flexible enough to provide their demand. And this is a norm for the Nordic countries. I know of multinational oil and gas where the number one in IT just sits with his laptop somewhere in maybe Copenhagen and controls the global operation. So this has been going on for years. But now, how would the other aspect of society move fast enough to catch up with that? Maybe the individual can be flexible enough, but what about politics? You know, what about rules and regulations, for example? Because in the case of WikiLeaks and even Pirate Bay, we saw this happening. Because when I interviewed Peter Sand, he said, well, the days of paying 40 or 20 US dollar for a CDs and only listening to 2 songs that you really like and having to bear with the other 8 songs that you don't like, technology has busted that, he said. And why can't we hear the only one that we want to hear? So to him, that's the moral legitimacy given by the enabling technology. I have to go for the second commercial break, but once we are back, let's discuss that and bring up the temperature in this room. Even though in Stockholm it's very cold. We'll catch you after this short break.
Setiap Isnin hingga Sabtu, Gala TV membawakan anda secara langsung 4.30 petang, 10.30 malam bersama Syazwan Zakaria, Umaira Uyut, Azman Yusof. Gala TV, buletin hiburan tempatan dan antarabangsa. Memaparkan perkembangan muzik, filem, teater, fashion, temu bual eksklusif. Gala TV, Isnin hingga Sabtu, 4.30 petang, 10.30 malam di Astro Awani. Berita segenap dimensi.
You're still watching Sudut Pandang, and we're talking about Sweden. We want to learn the secrets of Sweden in a good way. Partnership, maybe. That's the best way nowadays in globalization. But can politics and the other structures of the 20th century move fast enough with the advent of new technologies in the 21st? We've looked at WikiLeaks, for example, and we saw how that has changed diplomacy. And the exciting thing is, all these countries that were mentioned in the WikiLeaks document, none of them said that this is wrong. They say, no, that was taken out of context. So they didn't deny the fact that those were the cables. But before, that was an accepted norm in diplomacy. These are the things that you report in front, and there's this other stuff that you say in between yourself. But now technology is blurring that. So if we can link that even to Pirate Bay and the moral right that they feel is being enabled by technology, how do you look at that?
Of course, I mean, new technology and globalization as such is challenges but also opportunities for government, I think. WikiLeaks, being a diplomat myself, perhaps everything that has been released is not positive for diplomacy. But I think mostly it's a question of development. For a government, technology is basically very good. E-government, I mean, that's making government very available for
flattening
everyone.
Down the layers, going
and
direct,
the access much easier, real time. e-healthcare.
Yes.
I mean, how doing operations with a doctor in a totally different place, passing your income tax distribution through mail. That's very positive development.
Yes.
Of course, there will be areas that perhaps are not working as we would like them to do. And of course, you can have your views on whether CD piracy is good or not. But mainly, I think it's mainly positive. And I would think that the Swedish citizens, Swedes, are generally extremely positive when it comes to new technology, new opportunities, and the Swedish government also. There are challenges, but I would think that we focus more on the opportunities.
It's so easy to look at the Nordic countries and think that it's the government that's leading everything. But when you look at it, it's not. Government just open up the path, facilitate that, and the individuals or group of individuals that realize their creativity and their vision, their full potential. Do you think that's the main difference between Nordic countries, especially Sweden, for example, and since you've been here now in Southeast Asia and other Asian countries, that's the main difference? And if Asia is going to take over leadership engine of growth, that must be a focus.
I've been just here for 4 months. I'm not in a position to tell what Malaysia and other Asian countries should do, but I think the Swedish model have proven itself to be efficient. I mean, we have a fairly generous welfare model, but on the same time, if you look per capita, Sweden is probably the country with most multinational companies in the world. Ericsson, Volvo, Saab, Firefighter, all of them, Scania, Electrolux, IKEA, H&M, you name them. And those companies are operating in Sweden, in the Swedish context, with the high taxes, as you mentioned earlier, but they do it well and successfully. And they do it not only in Sweden, because if they did that in Sweden, they wouldn't exist. They already 100 years ago went abroad and are able to compete internationally. So there's something in the model that serves not only the citizens, but the industry and the economy. And if that is the perfect recipe for Asia, I'm not the one to tell. But there are certainly some aspects which are there, which I think also, for instance, your Prime Minister is looking into. He wants to move up the value chain, working with education, create more innovation. He wants to have less of corruption in the country, more research, inclusive social security system. So there are definitely aspects in our model that would fit into Malaysia, as I understand your Prime Minister wants it to be.
Yeah, that's why our Prime Minister not only is changing government transformation, but there's economic transformation, political transformation, because we realize, just like Sweden, they could not just change one area. The other areas must support. You have more than 50% of parliamentarians from the other side of gender as compared to Malaysia. Here, it's mainly male-dominated, but there in Sweden, it's mainly female-dominated in the parliament, and that's a norm. You know, and you already had real time at bus stops and bus stations, like how many more minutes is the bus coming, and when it's zero, I was testing that 11 years ago. It's exactly on the dot, then the bus arrived. But when I went on the road, I realized why that can happen, because the bus and other public transportation, they get priority. You know, they get longer coaches, and the traffic light let them go first, maybe more times than the private vehicles. So all this has been done in the 20th century. But going forward, you are also having a more plural society right now. And we've looked at the politics of Sweden, and now we see also what's happening in the other parts of Europe, like in UK and Germany. The far-right element is slowly creeping up. And how do you see that? Because a lot of people in Asia love Sweden, if I can put it that way. They would like to partner Sweden, but how Sweden now deal with pluralism, multiculturalism, I think is a new challenge of the 21st century for Sweden.
It's a good question. I mean, the Swedish society has a long tradition of being open, tolerant. 1 out of 7 Swedes now have a parent born outside, and most of them actually in the last decades from Muslim countries, from Iraq, from Somalia, from Sudan, from Afghanistan, and you name it. But as you mentioned, in some European countries, there has been a far-right quite actively. In Sweden, we've been blessed without any far-right parties that have been claiming anti-racist policies.
Slogans,
But in Sweden now, in the last elections a couple of months ago, for the first time ever, a far-right party entered parliament. They reached 5%.
Yes.
But what happens? Not the government coalition nor the opposition coalition wants to deal with it, that party.
Okay.
Meaning that basically 95% of the Swedish parliament is still going for tolerance, openness. And so far, after 2 months of the new government, there's been very limited influence of this party. But I think it's fair to say that there is an ongoing discussion in Sweden, but as far as I can see, there's no major change.
Okay.
And we'll see what happens with this party,
Okay.
if they stay in for another 4 years, or if it just disappears.
Don't worry, we'll call you back here from time to time to keep us posted, because that's all the time we have tonight. And Happy New Year to you.
Thank you so much.
And have a good Christmas. And we'll see you again maybe in the new year. And new developments, because we didn't have time to speak on the partnership that can happen between Sweden and Malaysia, for example, and
Which is already happening in
Yes.
several areas.
if Ericsson has the technology and capacity and development, Malaysia can maybe give the content and the applications for Asia that we can work together for the world. And that is just one example. Thank you so much, and we do want you to come again. Thanks to you for watching, and please send in your views to sudutpandangastro.com.my ataupun hantarkan pandangan anda juga kepada Facebook dan Twitter Anis. Selamat malam dan terima kasih. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure.